The first time I heard about how good Jiu-Jitsu was, it was in early 80s through my Taekwondo teacher Carlos Lodo told me about it. And I always remember that. Later on, in 1986, end of 86, I decided to take Jiu-Jitsu. I was already a Taekwondo black belt. I used to train and teach almost every night. I found an academy close to my house and I practiced for 2 months, but the instructor told me I had to leave. He told me in order to continue with the Jiu-Jitsu training, I had to quit Taekwondo. So I decided just to find another place, and there was only 2 places in the city. So the second place I went was a very famous professor, Francisco Sá. He was far from my house, but he was the pioneer of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the city. Since the 1960s, he was teaching there. I started training with him twice a week, and I trained a little bit in 86, but in 87 I was able to train almost the whole year. I learned all the basics. I was a white belt. I stayed as a white belt the whole year with him. And in the following year, in 1988, in the beginning of the year, I went to Europe. So there was no Jiu-Jitsu in Europe. Basically, Jiu-Jitsu was being exported at that time here in America. It was the first place. So my white belt knowledge was pretty impressive to myself, because in Europe I was able to play fight with some of my friends, black belt champions in Taekwondo and Karate, and I used to be able to take them down, control them and submit. This is only with the 1-year training, with the fundamentals. When I used to train with Professor Sá, I got a couple of my Taekwondo students involved in Jiu-Jitsu. So once in a while, on the weekend, on Sunday, we used to meet and train a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, review the positions, the self-defense, and the ground techniques. And I found a video, a VHS, of 1987 with my student Halda Gomez, who also was involved in Jiu-Jitsu at that time. And believe or not, we used to roll sometimes in the garage, and we had no mats. It was just, we had knee pads, and it's pretty crazy, but I have the video to prove. We used to spar in the regular floor. It's a real training. It's when I look back now, I think this is pretty crazy, but that's what happened back then in the 80s. And in regards of Grandmaster or Professor Francisco Sá, he was in Brazil and he stayed there teaching. I was able to meet him again in 2013. I looked for him. He was no longer teaching. He was 77 years old at that time. Found his son, and I got in contact with Professor Francisco Sá, and I met him in 2013. I visited him at home. He was very happy. We took some pictures, and he insists that I hold his red belt. So in the pictures I'm holding his red belt, and we had a great time. This was July of 2013 when we met again. And then in September of the same year, I heard the sad news that he passed away. But I'm very happy. I trained with him. He gave me good techniques, good training, and that's how I had my first contact with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.